The morning sun hit the wide glass panels of the Quinn household like liquid gold, spilling across the polished marble floors. Gordon Quinn liked mornings like this, simple, quiet, and predictable. At 38, he'd built the kind of life he once thought was only for people born lucky. A thriving construction company, a modern home overlooking the lake, a beautiful wife, and a daughter who believed he could fix anything from broken toys to the monsters under her bed. From the kitchen, laughter trickled like a melody, Sophie's giggles. Gordon stood at the counter, stirring his coffee as he watched her try to get pancake batter off her hands. Camille hovered beside her, flawless as ever in her silk robe, her hair perfectly tied back even before breakfast. She smiled for Sophie, but not for him. "Daddy, look. Mommy, let me flip one," Sophie said proudly. Gordon chuckled. "Looks like a professional job to me." He winked at Camille, hoping to catch her warmth. Instead, she smiled faintly and went back to her phone. That phone, it never left her hand anymore. Messages pinged through breakfast, through conversations, through bedtime stories. She'd angle the screen away every time he looked. At first, he brushed it off. Work, he told himself. She's the event director at Grandview Hotel. She's supposed to be busy. But lately, her smiles felt more like masks, her laughter more rehearsed. He carried Sophie to the car that morning, kissed her cheek, and watched her skip toward her kindergarten class. The way she turned back to wave made something inside him soften. For her, he'd endure anything. Later that week, Camille brought up the topic while folding laundry. "Gordon," she began casually, her tone carefully neutral, "I've been thinking. Maybe we should, stop at Sophie." He looked up from his laptop. "Stop. I mean kids," she said, smiling as though it were nothing. "You've got a company to run. I'm busier than ever. One's perfect. You always say Sophie's your world, right?" He studied her face. She wasn't nervous, just distant. The kind of distant that feels planned. "I thought we talked about maybe having another someday," he said slowly. "A boy, maybe?" She gave a soft laugh, the kind that made him feel childish. "We're not 25 anymore, Gordon. You got a lot on your plate. And honestly, I don't want to risk another pregnancy. I like where we are." He nodded, swallowing the quiet sting. "So what are you suggesting?" "A vasectomy," she said simply, still folding his shirts. "It's safe. Quick. You'll be fine in a day." He almost laughed. "That's sudden." "I already asked around," she continued smoothly. "Dr. Pugh is one of the best in Cedar Hill. He's done thousands. I can schedule it for you." Her efficiency startled him. "You already asked around?" he repeated. She finally looked at him, smiling that perfectly polished smile. "I just care about us, Gordon. About planning smart." He wanted to believe her. And for a moment, he did. The thought of more kids didn't scare him. It was losing her that did. So he agreed. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and lemon polish. On the morning of the procedure, Camille drove him there, humming softly along with the radio. Gordon tried to lighten the mood. "So this is it, huh? The end of an era." She laughed faintly. "Don't be dramatic. You'll survive. I'm just saying, I deserve at least a sympathy steak dinner after this." "Deal," she said, her eyes on the road. "Medium rare. My brave husband." They shared a small smile. It almost felt real again. When they arrived, Dr. Victor Pugh greeted them warmly. He was tall, fit, mid-40s with sharp eyes behind rimless glasses. His handshake was firm, his tone rehearsed to sound comforting. "Mr. Quinn, Mrs. Quinn. Procedures routine. You'll be out before you know it," Pugh said. Camille placed her hand on Gordon's shoulder. "I'll be in the waiting room." "Okay." He nodded, giving her a reassuring grin. "See you in an hour." But as she turned to leave, he caught something. Her eyes flickered toward Dr. Pugh for half a second too long. Not curiosity, recognition. The surgery room was bright, the sterile kind of bright that stripped away any illusion of comfort. The anesthetist spoke gently as the sedative flowed through Gordon's veins. His body relaxed, his vision blurred. He could still hear faint voices, nurses moving instruments, Dr. Pugh's steady rhythm of speech. Then Pugh's tone shifted. "Is his wife still in the waiting room?" Pugh asked. A nurse replied quietly, "Yes, doctor." "Good. After we finish, I need you to give her this envelope. Don't let him see it." The words sliced through Gordon's drifting consciousness like a knife. Envelope? His mind fought through the fog. What envelope? Why can't I see it? He felt his heartbeat thump against the heart monitor, steady but heavy. He wanted to open his eyes, to ask, to move, but instinct screamed, don't. So he didn't. He stayed still, breathing shallowly, pretending the anesthesia had done its job. The nurse hesitated. Understood, doctor. Should I give it to her immediately? Yes, Pugh said firmly. She knows what it's for. That line hit Gordon harder than the sedative. She knows what it's for. He could hear the metallic clink of tools, the quiet shuffle of shoes, Pugh's calm breathing. His brain spun. Was the envelope about the surgery? No. Why would that need to be hidden from him? Camille knew something. Something secret. Something meant to stay secret. He focused on the sounds, the steady beeps, the faint hum of the air conditioner, Pugh's voice humming along a tune under his breath. Every second stretched like wire. When the nurse announced they were done, Pugh's voice lightened again. Good work. I'll go brief the wife. Make sure she gets that envelope. Yes, doctor. The footsteps faded. Gordon's chest felt tight. Every instinct screamed that his life had just shifted, and he didn't even know why. When he woke, the room was quiet again. His throat felt dry, his limbs weak. Camille was there beside him, smiling too brightly. Hey, sleepyhead, she said softly, brushing his hair back. All done. You did great. He blinked, trying to steady his breathing. You talked to the doctor? Yes, she said quickly. Everything's fine. You'll just be sore for a bit. Her tone was too even, her smile too smooth. He looked for signs, an envelope, a paper, anything. Nothing. Can we go home soon? He murmured. Of course, she said, standing. I'll handle the paperwork. As she walked out of the room, Gordon watched her go, his stomach twisting. Her heels clicked down the hallway, steady, confident. She wasn't nervous. She was relieved. He stared at the ceiling, the white lights above him blurring into one thought that wouldn't go away. Why the envelope? And what was in it that I wasn't supposed to see? Something was wrong. Very wrong. And Gordon Quinn, for the first time in his perfect life, felt afraid of his own wife. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the blinds of the recovery room, slicing across Gordon's half-open eyes. The hum of hospital machines mixed with the faint murmur of voices from the hallway. His body felt sluggish, heavy from anesthesia, but his mind was awake, alive in a way it hadn't been since before the surgery. He turned his head slightly, pretending to adjust his pillow. Through the narrow glass window, near the bed, he caught sight of the parking lot below. Camille stood outside, her black coat fluttering in the wind. She wasn't alone. Dr. Pugh approached her, still in his white coat, an envelope in hand. Even from this distance, Gordon recognized the same brown envelope he'd heard mentioned during his procedure. His breath caught as Pugh handed it to her discreetly. Camille hesitated, then opened it immediately, eyes scanning whatever lay inside. And then came the part that made Gordon's stomach twist. She exhaled, smiled, and her shoulders sagged with relief. Not confusion, not concern. Relief. When Pugh reached out and gently touched her hand, she didn't pull away. The gesture was intimate, like two people who'd known each other far too long to be strangers. Gordon's throat went dry. His hand clenched the edge of the blanket until his knuckles turned white. He watched as Camille said something softly, nodding, before Pugh turned and walked back toward the clinic. She tucked the envelope into her purse and composed herself, face neutral again, the perfect, polished Camille. By the time she returned upstairs, Gordon had closed his eyes, feigning groggy sleep. She entered quietly, the faint scent of her perfume reaching him before her voice did. Hey, babe, she whispered, touching his shoulder. You okay? He forced a weak smile, pretending to wake. Yep, just tired. Doctor said everything went well, she said quickly, avoiding his gaze. We can go home in a few minutes. Her tone was chipper, almost rehearsed. Too smooth for comfort. He nodded, pretending not to notice the faint bulge in her purse where the envelope had been tucked away. The drive home was quiet. Gordon stared out the window, watching the town roll by in muted colors. Camille hummed along to the radio, occasionally glancing at her phone at stoplights. How's the pain? She asked finally, her voice casual. "It's fine," he said. "Doc gave me something strong." She nodded, eyes back on the road. "You'll be back to work in no time. Just don't lift anything heavy." He smirked faintly. "You'd be surprised how often I hear that from my foreman." No laughter, just a polite smile. When they reached home, Camille helped him inside, fussing over him just enough to look caring, but never long enough to seem invested. She tucked him in a bed with water and painkillers. "Do you need anything else?" He wanted to say the truth. Instead, he shook his head. "I'll be fine." "Good." She leaned down and kissed his forehead, a gesture that used to feel warm. Now it felt like performance. "Rest, okay? I'll be downstairs making a few calls." She left, closing the door behind her. He listened to her heels fade across the hardwood floors, followed by the faint click of her phone unlocking. He lay still, eyes open, heart pounding. What was in that envelope? That evening, as the sunset bled across the lake, Gordon found her sitting on the patio, scrolling through her phone. The wine glass beside her was half empty. "Feeling better?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah, still a little sore." "That's normal." She took a slow sip of wine. Her tone was light, but there was something absent in her eyes. "Doctor said you'll be back to normal in a week or two." Gordon nodded, stepping closer. "You seemed relieved after you talked to him." Her thumb froze mid-scroll. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, keeping his voice casual. "Just you were smiling. Looked like good news." She set her phone down, forcing a small laugh. "You were spying on me from the hospital window?" I was half awake. Caught a glimpse. She smirked, amused but defensive. "He was just telling me everything went smoothly. That's all." Her answer was too quick, too neat. Gordon smiled faintly. Must have been some reassuring words. Camille tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Why are you acting like this, Gordon? You're overthinking again." He let it go, or pretended to. "You're probably right." She stood, brushing imaginary lint off her robe. "You always imagine the worst, you know that. You need to trust me." Then she kissed his cheek and walked inside, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the fading sunset. By midnight, the pain in his abdomen was dull, but the ache in his chest was sharp. Camille was in bed beside him, phone glowing faintly in her hands. The reflection of her screen flickered across her face, quick messages, a muted laugh, a reply, then silence. Gordon turned slightly. "Who are you texting so late?" She jumped slightly, then smiled without meeting his eyes. "Just work. The hotel's short-staffed for the weekend." At midnight, she rolled her eyes. "You'd be shocked how many clients think event emergencies happen after hours. Go to sleep." He didn't respond. She eventually set the phone down, rolling to the very edge of the bed, her back to him. Her body language was a wall he couldn't climb. He stared at the ceiling. 5 years of marriage, and suddenly it felt like he was lying next to a stranger. The next morning, while Camille got Sophie ready for school, Gordon sat in the kitchen with his coffee untouched. The world outside looked unchanged, birds chirping, lakes shimmering, but something fundamental inside him had shifted. When Camille left for work, kissing his cheek like everything was normal, he waited until her car disappeared down the road. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. He stopped at one name, Wayne Riddle. Wayne had been an old friend from Gordon's early construction days, a man with a good heart but a cynical brain. He'd once been a police investigator before going private, specializing in insurance and corporate fraud. Gordon hadn't spoken to him in a while, but right now, he needed someone who could look at facts without emotion. He hit call. "Riddle Investigations," came the gruff voice on the other end. "Wayne, it's Gordon Quinn." "Gordy," a surprised laugh. "Haven't heard from you in years." "What's up, brother?" "I need your help," Gordon said quietly. "And I need you to keep it between us." There was a pause. "That's serious?" "Yeah." "All right. What's going on?" Gordon glanced toward the window, making sure the driveway was still empty. "It's about my wife and a doctor named Victor Pugh." Wayne whistled low. "You want surveillance, background, the full sweep?" "Everything. Discreetly. Don't contact her, don't spook anyone. Just find out what connects them." "You got it. Send me what you have." When he hung up, Gordon leaned back, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazily. He felt the guilt claw at him. He'd just hired someone to spy on his wife. But the unease in his gut drowned it out. Something wasn't right. He could feel it. That night, Camille climbed into bed long after midnight. She smelled faintly of hotel perfume and exhaustion. Gordon lay still, pretending to sleep, watching as she turned away from him, hugging her pillow tight. Her phone lit up again, a soft vibration against the sheets. She smiled faintly before setting it back down. And in that faint light, Gordon realized the truth he'd been avoiding. The woman lying next to him wasn't just distant. She was elsewhere entirely. He closed his eyes, the ache inside him deepening. His marriage, his trust, maybe even his sanity, everything was beginning to slip through his fingers. Wayne Riddle was not a man who asked unnecessary questions. Once Gordon had called him, the old cop-turned-private investigator got straight to work. Within 2 days, he'd sent Gordon a text. Need to meet. Somewhere quiet. They met at a corner booth in Harbor Joe's, a worn-down diner that smelled like burnt coffee and fried eggs. Wayne sat with his back to the wall, wearing a faded leather jacket and mirrored sunglasses, even though they were indoors. Gordon slid into the booth opposite him, his face drawn and sleepless. Wayne leaned forward. I did some digging on your doctor, Victor Pugh. Gordon's stomach nodded. And, on paper, he's golden, clean license, glowing reviews, solid patient record. But here's the kicker. Wayne pulled out a manila folder and dropped it on the table. He used to work at a hospital in Boston. Left suddenly, no public record why. I called in a few favors. Turns out, there were whispers of an affair with a patient's wife. The patient found out and tried to report him, but the hospital swept it under the rug to avoid a scandal. Gordon's jaw clenched. Jesus. Word is, Pugh left before they could officially fire him. 2 months later, he turned up here in Cedar Hill, set up his own clinic, and started making serious money, cash heavy. Way more than a normal urologist should be bringing in. Gordon exhaled slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. So he's got history. History, Wayne said grimly. An expensive taste. He slid over a printed photo, Pugh stepping out of a luxury condo complex downtown, keys in hand, sunglasses on. He's living in one of those new high-end towers. No mortgage. Everything paid up front. Somebody's bankrolling him, or he's getting gifts. Gordon stared at the image. Camille's been to that building. Wayne's brow furrowed. You sure? She said she had a client meeting there. Hotel partnership thing. That was last week. Wayne's lips pressed into a thin line. Gordy, I put eyes on the place. Your wife's been there 3 times this week. Same building. Lunch breaks. Gordon's throat went dry. You're certain? I don't play guesswork. Wayne pulled out another photo, a zoomed-in shot from across the street. Camille, wearing her beige coat, stepping through the condo doors with sunglasses on. Her expression was calm, purposeful. No signs of hesitation. Like it was routine. Gordon stared at the photo until his vision blurred. His pulse hammered in his ears. Wayne, he said finally, voice low. Keep watching. I need to know everything. Every time she goes there. Who she meets. What she does. Everything. Wayne nodded slowly. You sure you want to go down this road, brother? Once I start turning rocks, you can't unsee what crawls out. I've already seen enough, Gordon said. 3 days later, Wayne sent him a message with a short video clip attached. Gordon opened it in his office, his hand trembling as the footage loaded. The camera, hidden across the street, captured Camille walking into Pugh's building again. A few seconds later, Pugh appeared in the lobby, greeting her with a smile. He placed a hand on her lower back as he led her inside. The video ended there. Gordon dropped his phone on the desk and leaned back, heart pounding. He stared at the ceiling, at the rows of blueprints pinned along his walls, symbols of a life he'd built brick by brick, now crumbling in silence. He wanted to believe there was another explanation. Maybe work, maybe coincidence. But deep down, the truth had already started to rot inside him. That night, when Camille came home, she found him in the living room nursing a beer. Hey, she said brightly, setting down her purse. How was your day? Same old. He forced a smile. Yours? Crazy, she sighed. We've got 2 weddings next weekend, and the new conference deal is taking forever to finalize. I'm exhausted. Long lunch. She froze for half a second, then laughed lightly. What? You said you had a lunch meeting downtown. Oh yeah, vendor issue. She looked away too quickly, brushing her hair behind her ear. Why? Just wondering. She gave him a peck on the cheek, the kind of practiced affection that meant nothing. Don't start getting paranoid again, Gordy. He smiled faintly. Wouldn't dream of it. The following morning, he woke early. Camille was already up, shower running. Her phone sat on the nightstand, plugged in. For years, they'd shared everything, passwords, emails, even credit cards. But lately, she'd added a lock screen code. He waited until she left the room, then picked it up. No notifications. Just a wallpaper of Sophie at the beach. He sighed, setting it down again. I'm losing it, he thought. Be rational. But rationality shattered when, later that afternoon, he opened the kitchen drawer looking for batteries and found an old phone he hadn't seen in months. Camille's backup phone, cracked and dusty. She used to keep it as a spare. Out of curiosity, he powered it on. It took a moment to boot up, but when it did, the home screen came alive with a flood of old messages and photos. Most were harmless, family pictures, work emails, until he noticed a folder in the Notes app titled Private Docs. He opened it. Inside was a single PDF file. Paternity results, Sophie Quinn. Gordon's blood turned to ice. He tapped it open. The document bore an official-looking logo and lab details. It claimed to be a DNA test comparing Gordon's and Sophie's genetic markers, concluding with the words, probability of paternity, 0%. He froze. The air vanished from his lungs. He read it again and again. His mind replayed Sophie's laughter, her little hand holding her daddy, look what I made, and then this. But as he stared longer, cracks began to appear. The date, 3 weeks before Sophie's 5th birthday, didn't match the timeline. The lab address was misspelled, and the formatting looked off. It felt fake. He printed it from his office printer, spreading the pages across his desk. Every part of him wanted to storm upstairs and demand answers. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he called Wayne again. Got something for you, Gordon said tightly. An alleged paternity test. Need you to verify it. Send it, Wayne replied. You think it's real? I don't know. But if it's fake, I want to know who made it and why. The next few days crawled by in silence. Camille acted normal, too normal. Every smile, every affectionate word, every gesture felt calculated, as though she was performing the role of loving wife for an audience. Gordon, meanwhile, played his own part. He went to work, met clients, tucked Sophie into bed, all while his stomach churned with suspicion. Each night, after Camille fell asleep, he stared at the ceiling, whispering to himself, don't confront her. Not yet, because if the document was forged, then someone wanted him to believe a lie. And if it was real, then his entire life had already been stolen from him. Wayne's last text came late on a Friday. This thing stinks, Gordy. The lab listed doesn't exist. Whoever made this wanted to make it look official, but it's trash. Gordon stared at the message for a long time, the knot in his chest tightening. Keep digging, he replied. There's more to this. I can feel it. And as he turned off the light, lying next to a wife who smiled in her sleep, he realized he wasn't imagining things anymore. Something rotten had taken root in their lives, and it was only just beginning to show. Wayne's voice over the phone carried a weight that Gordon had never heard before. The old investigator usually spoke with a tone of dry humor, but not tonight. Gordy, Wayne began, we better sit down for this one. Gordon was in his office, staring at blueprints he hadn't touched in hours. He sank into his leather chair, the squeak loud in the silence. What is it? I've been running Pew's background deeper. You're not going to like what I found. Gordon rubbed his temples. After everything you've already told me, I doubt you can shock me anymore. Wayne sighed. Buddy, this one will. He paused. Turns out Pew and Camille, your Camille, were engaged once. Back in Boston. About 11 years ago. The words hit Gordon like a steel beam to the chest. Engaged. His voice cracked. You're sure? Positive. I found a few old engagement announcements buried in a Boston Society page. No pictures, just a blurb. And get this, the name Camille Hutchins is right there, plain as day. Pew's full name beside it. Gordon sat in stunned silence, every muscle in his face tightening. She told me she'd never been engaged before, he whispered. She said her longest relationship before me was a year and a half with some bartender. Then she lied, Wayne said flatly. And for what I can piece together, their breakup wasn't exactly clean. Pugh lost his hospital position a few months after they split. Gossip columns hinted it was related to her, though no one could prove it. He walked out of that hospital broke, with his career in tatters. Gordon's mind reeled. You think she had something to do with it? Hard to say. But listen to this. About a year later, she shows up here in Cedar Hill, working as an assistant event planner at a hotel. You met her a few months after that at some charity dinner, right? Yeah, Gordon said slowly, remembering that night. Camille in a red dress, her laughter lighting up the table, how she'd seemed to find him in that crowd like fate had pulled them together. Wayne's tone dropped. That charity dinner? It was sponsored by one of Pugh's old investors. Guy's name came up in both their circles. I'm not saying it's proof, but Camille meeting you there might not have been as random as it looked. Gordon stood, pacing. Are you telling me that my marriage, our whole damn relationship, was orchestrated by her and Pugh? I can't prove it yet, Wayne said, but it's looking that way. Pugh had motive, ruined career, money problems, a grudge. Camille had charm and connections. You, meanwhile, had something they needed, a solid business and a $2 million life insurance policy. Gordon froze mid-step. How the hell do you know about my policy? Public records, Gordy. You took it out 5 years ago, right after Sophie was born. Standard coverage, but enough to make anyone greedy start scheming. He gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white. You think they're planning to... Yeah, Wayne interrupted grimly. I think they're setting you up. The affair's the distraction. The real prize is your policy. And if I'm right, they don't intend for you to be around much longer. Gordon sank into his chair again, ball rising in his throat. His hands trembled. Jesus, Wayne. She's sleeping next to me every night. Don't do anything rash, Wayne warned. Not yet. You need solid proof. And for that, we'll need another angle. What angle? Gordon muttered. Pugh's ex-wife, Julia Pugh. They divorced right after he left Boston. I did some digging. She's still in the state, runs a small art studio in Somerville. If anyone knows what kind of man he really is, it's her. 2 days later, Gordon found himself driving north under a gray, washed-out sky. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, the kind of cold winter road that seemed to swallow sound. Every mile felt like another layer of his old life peeling away. He found Julia Pugh's studio tucked between a laundromat and a bakery, an old brick building with paint-chipped windows and a sign that read canvas and soul. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. She was there, mid-40s, graceful in a tired way. Her auburn hair was streaked with silver, and her paint-splattered apron looked like armor she'd worn for years. She turned as he entered, brushing her hands on a rag. Can I help you? She asked politely. Julia Pugh? That depends who's asking. My name's Gordon Quinn. He hesitated. I think we have someone in common. Dr. Victor Pugh. Her expression hardened immediately, eyes narrowing. If you're here on his behalf, you can turn right around. I'm not, Gordon said quickly. Trust me, I'm the last person on earth who'd be working for him. She studied him for a moment, then motioned to a small table near the window. All right, Mr. Quinn, sit down. Tell me why you came. He did carefully. Not every detail, but enough: his vasectomy, the envelope, Camille's secrecy, Wayne's findings. Julia listened without interrupting, though her expression grew darker with each passing minute. When he finished, she leaned back, arms crossed. That bastard never changes, she muttered. You believe me? Gordon asked. Oh, I don't need to believe you, she said bitterly. I lived it. Victor Pugh destroys everything he touches. He's charming, intelligent, and manipulative as hell. When we were married, he was having affairs with patients. One of them, I later found out, was Camille Hutchins. Gordon froze. You're saying? I knew her, Julia said coldly. She was working as a PR rep for a private clinic in Boston. Victor brought her into our lives, claimed it was business. Within 6 months, she was in our bed when I was working late shifts. When I confronted him, he denied everything. Then she vanished. A year later, our marriage collapsed. He lost his job, and I heard she'd moved out of state. I should have guessed she was plotting her next con. Gordon's head spun. So it's true. They've done this before. Julia's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and sorrowful. If she's back in his orbit, then you're in serious danger, Mr. Quinn. Victor's a predator. He doesn't care about people, just control. He uses women like tools. But Camille, she learned from him. She's every bit as cold. Gordon leaned forward. You think they'd actually kill me? Julia hesitated. I think if it benefited them, yes. He's done worse than people know. And if she's helping him, then you're nothing more than another payday. Silence filled the studio. Outside, the snow had started to fall, soft flakes brushing against the window pane. Gordon finally whispered. She planned it all. The meeting, the marriage, even Sophie. Julia's expression softened, pity flickering through her eyes. Maybe she loved you once, she said quietly. But people like Victor and Camille don't do anything without purpose. If your daughter's part of their scheme, it's because she needed a reason to keep you loyal. Gordon stared out the window, his reflection fractured by the glass. Then everything in my life has been a lie. Julia stood, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Maybe not everything, she said. You still have the truth, and that's something they can't fake. He met her gaze, eyes dark with resolve. Then I'll use it. Julia nodded slowly. Be careful. If Victor finds out you're onto him, he'll make the first move. I'm counting on it, Gordon said, standing. His voice was low, steady now, the shock cooling into something colder, purpose. As he stepped out into the falling snow, one thought burned in his mind. If they thought he was just a mark in their long con, they had no idea who they were dealing with. But for now, he would keep playing his part, the trusting husband, the fool in the dark, because soon enough, their perfect little act was going to collapse. And when it did, he'd be there to watch them fall. Julia Pugh poured 2 glasses of whiskey, her hands trembling just slightly as the amber liquid caught the light from the window. Outside, snow fell over Somerville like ash, quiet, constant, endless. She slid 1 glass across the table to Gordon. You're going to need that, she said softly. Gordon took it, but didn't drink. His mind was a storm. Faces, lies, half-truths colliding. Camille's laughter at dinner parties. Her hands in his. Sophie's tiny fingers clutching his thumb. And all of it, tainted. Julia sat across from him, her expression torn between anger and weariness. You want the truth, Mr. Quinn? She asked. Fine, I'll give it to you. But it's not going to make you feel any better. I don't need better, Gordon said. I need facts. Julia leaned back, took a sip and began. Camille destroyed Victor before she ever met you. When we were still married, she came into his life like a wildfire. Young, manipulative, beautiful. She knew exactly how to twist him. He thought she was in love with him. Hell, I think he believed she was the only person who truly understood him. But she was playing both of us. She seduced him, bled him dry, and when she was done, she vanished. Gordon's jaw clenched. So she used him. Yes. But here's the thing, Victor never let go. Julia set down her glass. He obsessed over her. He lost his job, his reputation, everything. For years, he blamed me, his colleagues, anyone but himself. Then, out of nowhere, he gets a call from her. She tells him she's married, to a successful contractor with money and a stable life. That you gave her everything he couldn't. Gordon's stomach twisted, so he wanted revenge. And she wanted control, Julia said. That's what binds them. Not love. Power. Victor still wants her, but she only wants what she can get out of him. Which is... Julia rose and walked to a filing cabinet tucked beneath a painting easel. She pulled open a drawer, rifled through folders, and returned with a bundle of worn leather-bound journals. These, she said, I kept them after our divorce. They're his private journals, his thoughts, his plans, his grudges. He was meticulous. I never told him I kept copies. Gordon flipped through one. Pages upon pages of neat handwriting, clinical, detached, furious. Notes about former patients, money, and one recurring name. Camille Hutchkins. Julia pointed to a passage dated 2 years earlier. Read that. Gordon read aloud. If she ever comes back, I'll make her remember me. Together, we could turn everything we lost into gold. I'll design it like surgery, methodical, irreversible. The husband will never see it coming. The words felt like ice. He's talking about me, Gordon whispered. Julia nodded. They built this together, Gordon. The marriage, the false love, even the surgery you just had, it's all part of their blueprint. They're professionals at destruction. He closed the journal, the sound sharp in the quiet room. What kind of man writes something like this? Julia's eyes met his. A man who thinks he's God. Later that evening, Gordon called Wayne. His voice was low, deliberate. Julia gave me something big, Pew's journals. They confirm everything. Damn, Wayne muttered through the receiver. You reading them now? I can barely get through 2 pages without wanting to break something. Well, brace yourself, buddy, because I've got my own update, and it's not going to calm your nerves. Gordon tightened his grip on the phone. Go on. Camille's not working alone. I pulled financial records and traced money moving through 3 shell companies tied to Pew's medical practice. Guess who's managing those accounts? Who? Melody Kaufman. Gordon frowned. Camille's sister? Bingo. Except she's going by her married name now. Works as a forensic accountant for a firm in Dallas. On paper, she's squeaky clean, but she's been moving chunks of money through offshore accounts every few weeks. Small enough to avoid notice, but the pattern's consistent. Gordon stared into the dark, his reflection faint in the office window. So the two of them, and her sister, are all in on it. Yeah, Pew handles the medical setup, Camille does the emotional manipulation, and Melody moves the money. They're running a goddamn con syndicate. Jesus Christ, Gordon muttered. It gets worse, Wayne continued. Melody's also connected to the insurance adjuster that handles your life policy. She's been emailing the guy under a consulting contract, probably setting up the payout structure for when, well, you know. Gordon's voice turned to gravel. When I'm gone. Neither man spoke for several seconds. The sound of traffic hummed faintly on the other end. Finally, Wayne broke the silence. We need a plan. I already have one, Gordon said. 2 days later, Wayne met him at a diner off I-40, the kind with flickering neon lights and burnt coffee. Gordon looked different, sharper, colder. The sleeplessness had hardened into focus. Julia gave me the copies of Pew's journals, Gordon said, sliding a folder across the table. You want to scan through these? Wayne flipped through them, whistling low. This is gold, man. He actually wrote about you like a case study. Even mentioned your vasectomy procedure, called it the final phase. Yeah, Gordon said darkly. That's the part that really keeps me up at night. Wayne nodded grimly. We can use this. Build a file, hand it to a detective quietly. But we got to be careful. Too soon, and they'll know we're onto them. That's why we don't move yet, Gordon said. His tone was firm, his stare fixed. They think they're ahead of me. That's good. Let them believe it. Wayne raised an eyebrow. You sure you can keep playing along? Sleeping next to her? Pretending everything's fine. Gordon gave a hollow laugh. I've been doing it for months already. What a few more weeks? He stirred his coffee absently, eyes distant. They're staging something bigger than just money. Pew's journals mention a medical complication setup. If anything happens to me, heart attack, stroke, even a bad fall, it'll look like malpractice. The insurance will pay out double. Camille gets everything. Wayne's hand tightened around his mug. They're monsters. Gordon nodded slowly. Yeah, but monsters slip up when they think they're invincible. He reached in his coat pocket and slid a small USB drive across the table. Here, I've been recording our house. Hidden cameras. Voice recorders. If she slips, I'll have her. Wayne grinned faintly. Now that's the Gordon I know. Gordon's eyes were cold steel. I'm done reacting, Wayne. From now on, we control the board. That night, back home, Gordon watched Camille through the reflection of their living room window. She sat on the couch, scrolling her phone, a faint smile playing on her lips. Her face glowed under the light of the screen, serene, practiced, perfect. Everything okay? She asked sweetly, noticing him watching. Yeah, he said, forcing a small smile. Just thinking. About what? He took a sip of his drink, eyes never leaving hers. About how lucky I am. She smiled, touched his arm, and turned back to her phone. Gordon's jaw tightened, but inside his thoughts were razor sharp. He wasn't the man being conned anymore. He was the man laying a trap. And soon, when they thought they'd won, he'd make sure every one of them fell into it. Wayne's call came just after midnight. Gordon was at his desk, surrounded by Pugh's journals, a web of printouts, and the dull glow of his laptop. The hum of the refrigerator in the next room was the only sound in the house. Wayne's voice came through low and grim. "Gordy, I got it. I finally got it." Gordon sat up straight. "Got what?" "The proof. The smoking gun." The words hit like caffeine. "Talk to me." Wayne's fingers clicked in the background, probably scrolling through whatever data he dug up. "I ran Pugh's credentials through a hospital database from years before your vasectomy. Turns out, he accessed your medical file years before your surgery. I'm talking years, Gordon. Back when Camille was still pretending she didn't even know who he was." Gordon's breath caught. "How's that even possible? That file should have been private." "Should have," Wayne agreed. "But Pugh used a temporary admin login. Someone from the IT department must have owed him a favor or a check. The access logs show multiple edits to your record. The first one, 5 years ago, marked you as having potential fertility anomalies. The second added notes about prior genetic samples." Gordon stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. "Genetic samples?" "Wayne, I never gave any DNA samples before the vasectomy." "Exactly," Wayne said. "But Pugh made it look like you did. Then when the paternity test came up recently, the fake DNA data matched his insert. It was his lab, his data, his setup. That test Camille saw, the one that told her Sophie wasn't yours, it was manufactured straight out of those falsified hospital files." Gordon's throat went dry. So the entire breakdown, the fights, the distance, everything, it was engineered. Wayne's voice hardened. They were building a psychological weapon. Break your mind first, then set up the accident. Pugh's entries about your vasectomy being the final step. Now it makes sense. Gordon turned toward the mirror above his desk. The man staring back was barely recognizable. Eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched, something colder behind them. "The surgery," he murmured. "It wasn't just a vasectomy." "No," Wayne said. "It was a setup. Pugh needed access to your body, to your records. I pulled the medical report. There's a duplicate version in the hospital archives, signed by Pugh, but never submitted to insurance. That version says you experienced minor complications. If that version goes public, it paints you as the victim of medical negligence. Which means," Gordon's pulse hammered, "which means they could stage your death as a malpractice tragedy," Wayne finished. "Camille collects your life insurance. Pugh cashes in on the lawsuit. Melody cleans the money through her firms. It's a full circle con." Gordon gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white. "Jesus Christ, they've been planning this for years." Wayne exhaled. "It's beautiful in a sick way. Fake fertility issues, fake paternity results, emotional collapse, then the tragic accident. They get rich, you get buried." Gordon stared at the wall, the weight of every conversation, every false smile crashing down. He saw Camille's face in flashes, how she'd held his hand in the recovery room, her soft whisper. "It's finally over." Now he understood what she meant. It wasn't comfort, it was closure. Her closure. He muttered. She already thought it was done. "Hey," Wayne said, "don't spiral yet. We've got a chance to turn this around." "Ow!" Gordon's voice was a low growl. "They've built this to perfection." "You said it yourself last time," Wayne replied. "Let them think they're winning." Gordon inhaled slowly, forcing calm. "Then we play dumb." "Exactly. But while you're playing dumb, I'm digging. I'll get digital proof of those file edits, screenshots, timestamps, IP addresses. You gather whatever physical evidence you can. Anything Pugh touched, letters, call logs, USB drives, even his assistant contact info. We'll need a trail." Gordon rubbed his temple. "Julia said he used to record everything. Dictation memos. Then find them," Wayne said. "He's arrogant. People like him always leave breadcrumbs because they think no one's smart enough to follow them." The next day, Gordon took his work truck and drove out to one of Pugh's old clinics, a suburban medical suite that had closed down months ago. The place smelled of dust and disinfectant. He picked the back door lock using an old contractor's trick and stepped inside. His flashlight beam cut through the dark. Cabinets lined the walls, drawers half open, papers left behind. He found a locked drawer in Pugh's old office and pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside were voice recorders, a few labeled flash drives, and folders marked Consult, Patient Q. Gordon's stomach churned. Patient Q, Quinn. He took everything. Back home, he plugged in one of the drives. The folders inside were dated, audio files, scanned forms, and one labeled Revision Report, Q Case. He opened it. On screen appeared Pugh's notes. Objective: induce credibility gap between patient and spouse. Manipulate diagnostic results to prompt emotional instability. Termination phase contingent upon surgical compliance and environmental trigger, possible domestic accident. Gordon sat motionless, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat on the screen. Then he hit play on one of the audio files. Pugh's voice filled the room, smooth, clinical, detached. Patient spouse appears increasingly suspicious, but remains manipulable. Continue reinforcing the illusion of infertility. Ensure she views him as impotent, emotionally and biologically. Final report to be archived under litigation prep. Gordon felt bile rise in his throat. Every word confirmed it. He was prey in their experiment. He grabbed his phone, called Wayne again. "I found it," he said. "Voice recordings. Plans. Notes. Everything." "Good," Wayne replied. "Now back it all up. Twice. And for God's sake, don't let Camille catch wind of this." "She won't," Gordon said. "Not yet." That evening, Camille returned home from her wellness retreat. She looked radiant, glowing, her voice light as she greeted him in the kitchen. "You look tired," she teased. "Rough day." He smiled faintly, masking everything boiling underneath. "Just long," he said. "You?" She shrugged. "The spa was nice. I needed it." She poured herself wine, then tilted her head. "You seem different." "Guess the surgery's still in my head," he replied easily. Hard to stop thinking about it. Her smile wavered a fraction, barely noticeable, but he caught it. "Don't worry," she said quickly. "It's over now. You can move on." He met her gaze, forcing warmth into his voice. "Yeah," he said softly. "It's over." But inside his thoughts burned. "Not yet. Not until I buried both of you in the truth." The next week passed in silence. Camille acted oblivious, playing the devoted wife, while Gordon played the perfect fool. He started recording their conversations, subtle phone taps, a mic hidden under the table. He mirrored Pugh's methods, but with purpose. Each smile from her became data. Every careless word evidence. Late one night, Wayne called again. "You still got the recordings?" "All of them," Gordon said. "And backups off-site." "Good. Because I just traced the IP from Pugh's fake logins. It's registered to a network inside the same hospital where your vasectomy was done." "He used the system during your surgery, Gordy. I mean literally logged in while you were under anesthesia." Gordon's hand tightened around the phone. "So when I was out cold, he was already writing your obituary," Wayne finished. The silence between them stretched, heavy and electric. Then Gordon said, very calmly, "Then it's time to make him think it's working." Wayne hesitated. "Meaning what?" "Meaning I keep smiling. Keep pretending to unravel. Let them believe they've won. The deeper they dig their grave, the better I'll bury them in it." Wayne exhaled a low whistle. "You sure you can stomach that?" Gordon's eyes glinted in the dark reflection of his office window. "After what they've done, I can stomach anything." And as he hung up, he looked at the glowing screen filled with Pugh's words, every lie, every manipulation, and whispered to himself, "Let them think they're winning." 2 weeks later, the silence broke. Wayne called while Gordon was tightening bolts on a steel frame, the sounds of construction echoing around him. His voice was sharp, urgent. "Gordy, we've got a problem. It's happening. Now." Gordon wiped the sweat off his brow. "Slow down. What's happening?" I tapped into Pugh's burner phone. "He and Camille have been talking about your job site, the downtown scaffolding project." Pugh told her, "Once it collapses, he's gone. You'll collect, and no one will suspect a thing. They're planning an accident. Tomorrow." Gordon's grip tightened around the wrench. "A collapse?" "Yeah," Wayne said. "They're planning to rig the bolts. It'll look like a construction fault, your fault." For a moment, Gordon said nothing. He just looked out across the site at the web of beams and scaffolding gleaming under the morning sun, and imagined his body lying among them, blood mixing with concrete dust. Then he said quietly, They picked the wrong job. That night, Gordon sat alone at his desk, headphones on, listening to the intercepted recording. Pugh's voice was clear and calm. Once he's gone, you'll collect. The insurance, the malpractice payout, it's all in motion. Melody's handle the accounts. You'll walk away a rich widow. Then Camille's soft voice, laced with a cruel calm. And no one will ever trace it back to us? No one, Pugh replied. It'll look like negligence. The fool even signed off on the safety inspection himself. Gordon paused the playback. His heart didn't race, didn't even twitch. The rage had burned out days ago, leaving something colder. Focused, he opened his drawer and pulled out a small, black case. Inside, the pinhole cameras Wayne had sourced through a security contact. Gordon turned one over in his hand, its lens no bigger than a screw head. At 2 a.m, Gordon parked outside Pugh's condo. The street was quiet, rain misting under the lamps. He wore a maintenance uniform, fake ID clipped to his vest, toolbox in hand. He moved like a ghost through the building's back entrance, up the service stairs, past the janitor's closet. Pugh's door had a keypad lock, but Gordon had memorized the fingerprints from a smudge pattern he'd spotted weeks earlier. It took him less than a minute to get in. The condo was immaculate, sterile. Expensive art, minimalist furniture, everything about it screamed control. Gordon moved through each room in silence, installing the cameras behind a vent grill, under the desk, in the kitchen light fixture, even inside the smoke detector above the couch. As he worked, he whispered to himself, "Let's see how perfect your little empire really is, Victor." When he was done, he left just as quietly, locking the door behind him. The next morning, he met Wayne at a diner near the station. Wayne looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but his grin was feral. "Got the feed working," he said, tapping his laptop. "We're live. Every angle." Gordon sat across from him, sipping black coffee. "Good. I need another favor." Wayne frowned. "What kind?" "I'm calling in Detective Lester." Wayne blinked. "Lester? The same guy who used to work the fraud cases with you?" "Yeah. He owes me one." Gordon leaned forward. "He's the only cop I trust not to tip them off. If this goes down tonight, I want him ready to move." Wayne nodded slowly. "So it's tonight, then?" Gordon's eyes hardened. Tonight. Evening came like a slow burn. In Pugh's condo, the cameras streamed everything. Pugh pacing in his kitchen, glass of scotch in hand. Camille standing near the window, arms crossed, pretending nerves she didn't feel. Pugh spoke first. "The scaffold rig is done. By morning, he'll be a headline." Camille exhaled softly. "And the payout?" "Melody's already filed preliminary claims," Pugh said. "It's all automated. As soon as his death certificate's issued, the transfer begins." Camille smirked faintly. "I'll have to act devastated." Pugh chuckled. "You're a natural at that." She turned toward him. "And after?" He smiled. "After we disappear? Costa Rica. The house is waiting." Gordon sat in a dim office across town, headphones on, eyes fixed on the live feed. The evidence was gold, better than he'd imagined. Every word, every laugh recorded in perfect clarity. Wayne sat beside him, staring at the monitors in disbelief. "Jesus," Wayne muttered. "They're confessing to everything." "Keep recording," Gordon said. "Don't stop." 30 minutes later, Detective Lester arrived, grizzled, gray-haired, his badge still clipped to his belt. "You weren't kidding," he said after listening for 5 seconds. "This is airtight. You sure you're ready for this?" "I've been ready for weeks," Gordon said evenly. "You've got a warrant?" Lester held up the folder. "Signed and sealed." "Then let's end it." Inside Pugh's condo, the mood had shifted. Pugh was pacing, restless. "Tomorrow, Camille. Everything changes tomorrow." She poured him more scotch. "And Gordon? What if he suspects?" "He doesn't have a spine," Pugh scoffed. "He's been unraveling for months. Trust me, he's too busy doubting himself to see what's right in front of him." "Still," she murmured, "I'll feel better when it's done." Pugh smiled coldly. "Then you'll feel better soon." The door burst open. "Police. Hands where I can see them." The room erupted in chaos, glass shattering, Pugh stumbling backward, Camille gasping. 2 detectives pinned Pugh to the wall while another cuffed Camille. She screamed, "What the hell is this?" Lester stepped in, badge flashing. "Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance fraud." tampering with medical records. The works. Pugh's face drained of color. You can't prove anything. Lester smirked. Oh, we can. You've been talking to us for the last hour. The cameras, hidden, silent, were still rolling as the officers read them their rights. At the precinct, the interrogation room smelled of metal and stale coffee. Camille sat in one corner, wrists cuffed, eyes red from crying, but Gordon knew better. Her tears were always selective. When the door opened and Gordon stepped inside, the air changed. The room went still. She looked up, disbelief flooding her face. Gordon, she whispered. What are you doing here? He didn't answer right away. He just stood across from her, his posture calm, almost eerily so. Pugh sat beside her, jaw tight, glaring daggers. Gordon set his phone on the table and hit play. Pugh's voice filled the room again. Once he's gone, you'll collect and no one will suspect. The sound echoed off the concrete walls. Camille flinched. Gordon watched her face the whole time, watched every twitch, every flicker of realization as the truth pinned her down harder than the cuffs. When the recording ended, he finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, carved from months of hell. You planned every move, he said, leaning forward just slightly. Every word, every lie, every cut. You thought I was blind. Thought I'd crumble. He paused, eyes locked on hers. So did I. He stood, turned toward the door, and walked out, cold, calm, unbroken, as the sound of Camille's breath hitched behind him and Pugh cursed under his breath. The scandal hit Cedar Hill like a hurricane. By dawn, every news outlet was screaming headlines about the doctor, wife, and sister conspiracy. Photos of Camille being led out of Pugh's condo in handcuffs were plastered across TV screens and news feeds. Pugh's smug, polished face looked hollow in his mugshot. Melody's picture came next, tight-lipped, furious, still in her designer coat. For Gordon, it was all surreal. One moment, he was a man fighting to prove his own sanity. The next, he was the center of a criminal case that ripped through the town like wildfire. 3 days after the arrests, Gordon sat in the courtroom, his palms pressed flat on the oak table. Reporters filled the back rows, cameras flashing even though they weren't supposed to. Beside him sat Wayne, who hadn't left his side since the takedown. Across the aisle, the defendants were led in, Victor Pugh first, then Camille, then Melody. Camille's hair was pinned back, her face pale. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked small. When her eyes met his, something flickered, shame, fear, maybe both, but Gordon didn't flinch. He kept his expression still, unreadable. The prosecutor's voice cut through the silence. Your Honor, the state will prove that these 3 defendants conspired to defraud life insurance companies, manipulate medical records, and commit premeditated murder. Each word was a hammer. Gordon felt them, but they didn't break him. Over the following weeks, the trial unfolded like a grotesque play. Wayne's digital evidence was airtight, videos, call logs, and even Pugh's handwritten notes outlining the plan to remove the subject, GQ, permanently. Julia Pugh's journals filled in the emotional motive, revenge and obsession. When Gordon took the stand, the courtroom went silent. The prosecutor asked gently, Mr. Quinn, can you describe your relationship with the defendants prior to learning of the conspiracy? Gordon took a deep breath. I thought I had a wife who loved me, a doctor I could trust, a family that cared. He paused, his voice even. Turns out, I was a paycheck with a pulse. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He continued, his tone calm, factual, never bitter, never loud. They manipulated my surgery, my medical records, my mind. They tried to convince me that my daughter wasn't mine. Camille began to cry, shoulders shaking. Her attorney touched her arm, whispering something, but she kept staring at Gordon. He didn't look back. But the truth, he said, always find a way out. And I wasn't about to let them bury me before it did. Cross-examination was brutal. Pugh's lawyer tried to paint Gordon as paranoid and unstable. You admit, Mr. Quinn, you spied on your wife, hired a private investigator, and broke into Dr. Pugh's property? Yes, Gordon said evenly. Because I was right. Laughter erupted from somewhere in the gallery, quickly hushed by the judge's gavel. Pugh glared daggers at him from across the room, but Gordon didn't bite. He learned something powerful. Silence could hurt more than rage. When Camille took the stand, she tried to save herself. Her tears came easily. "I didn't want to hurt him," she sobbed. "Victor made me believe it was just insurance paperwork. I didn't know about the accident plan. I swear I didn't." The prosecutor raised a single brow. "And yet, Mrs. Quinn, we have a recording of you saying, 'Once he's gone, you'll collect.' How do you explain that?" Camille froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The jury watched her unravel in real time. Melody refused to testify altogether, sitting stone-faced, her lawyer whispering nonstop. Pugh, arrogant to the end, declared that everything was a fabrication by a jealous husband. The judge looked ready to strangle him. On the final day, Gordon returned to the courthouse for sentencing. The judge's voice was calm, deliberate. Victor Pugh, 25 years, no parole. Camille Hutchins Quinn, 18 years, eligible for parole after 12. Melody Kaufman, 8 years, parole after 5. Camille let out a strangled cry, slumping in her chair. Pugh didn't react at all. Melody's hands trembled as she covered her face. Gordon simply nodded once, then stood. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones flashing like lightning. "Mr. Quinn, how does it feel to see justice served?" He paused on the courthouse steps, the autumn wind ruffling his hair. "It feels quiet," he said softly. "That's enough." Then he walked away. Life didn't fix itself overnight. The months that followed were slow, deliberate, healing. Gordon sold the house he and Camille had shared. Every wall was haunted by laughter, by lies. He bought a smaller place near the edge of town, overlooking the lake. Construction work became therapy. Hammer and steel were things he could trust. Wayne visited often, sometimes just to sit on the porch with him in silence. "You did it, man," he'd say. "You beat them." Gordon would smile faintly. "I didn't beat them. I survived them." Wayne nodded. Sometimes that's the same thing. Sophie became his anchor. The custody hearing was swift. Camille's crimes left no room for debate. The judge granted Gordon full custody. Sophie ran into his arms afterward, her small voice trembling. "Are we staying together now, Daddy?" "Forever." He held her tight. "Forever, baby girl. I promise." Naomi Delaney, Sophie's gentle nanny, became more than an employee. She'd been there through the worst of it, bringing meals, comforting Sophie, checking in on Gordon even when he said he was fine. One evening, as the sun dipped over the lake, Naomi brought Sophie home from school. She lingered at the door, watching Gordon repair a wooden chair. "You're starting to smile again," she said softly. He looked up, meeting her gaze, trying to remember how. Naomi's smile was warm, steady. "You'll get there." He believed her. A year later, Gordon stood on a hill overlooking a new construction site, his company's biggest project yet. The skyline shimmered, cranes rising against a pink horizon. Wayne's truck pulled up beside him. "You ever think you'd make it here?" Wayne asked. Gordon exhaled slowly. "Didn't think I'd make it at all." Wayne laughed. "Well, you did. You're free." Gordon looked toward the horizon, hands resting on his belt. "Free," he repeated quietly. "That's one hell of a word." His phone buzzed. Naomi texting a picture of Sophie painting by the window. For the first time in years, Gordon smiled, a real one. Not forced, not guarded, just honest. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and drove toward home. The past was buried. The lies were gone. And for the first time, peace didn't feel like a stranger. A full year had passed since the trial. But for Gordon Quinn, time had become something new. Not an enemy, not a healer, just a quiet companion. The courthouse looked different now. The same marble floors that once echoed with betrayal now felt lighter beneath his steps. He stood before the judge again, but this time there were no accusations, no reporters, no flashbulbs. Only family. Naomi sat in the front row, holding Sophie's hand. Wayne was beside them, grinning wide enough to crack his face. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper, sterile, official, and yet strangely comforting. Judge Morales smiled over her glasses. "Mr. Quinn, do you understand the weight of what you're doing today?" Gordon nodded, voice steady. "I do, Your Honor. You're petitioning to adopt Sophie Quinn, age 9, as her legal daughter, despite not being her biological father. He turned towards Sophie. Her dark curls framed a face full of light. "She's always been mine," he said simply. "Paper doesn't change that." The judge smiled, eyes softening. "Then let's make it official." Her gavel struck wood, a single sharp sound that seemed to echo across every heartbreak he'd endured. Sophie jumped up, clapping, and threw her arms around his neck. "Daddy, you're my real dad now." Gordon hugged her tight, tears he didn't expect burning his eyes. "I've always been sweetheart," he whispered. "Always." Naomi stood, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Even Wayne coughed, pretending something was stuck in his throat. The judge chuckled softly. "Congratulations, Mr. Quinn. You're a father in every sense of the word." That evening, they celebrated at home, just the three of them, plus Wayne, who refused to miss out on Naomi's cooking. Naomi's laughter filled the kitchen as she flipped steaks on the skillet, her hair tied up, apron smudged with sauce. Sophie danced barefoot on the tiles, spinning in circles with a paper crown on her head. Wayne raised a glass of root beer. "To new beginnings," he declared, "and to the kid who finally got a dad cooler than I'll ever be." Gordon laughed, clinking glasses. "You're still family, Wayne, even if Sophie outranks you now." Sophie giggled. "Uncle Wayne, you could be my assistant." Wayne clutched his chest in mock offense. "Assistant? I built half your daddy's empire." Naomi leaned over the table, smiling at Gordon. "She's got your humor." He looked at the two of them, Naomi and Sophie, the heart of everything that had survived the storm. The house no longer echoed with ghosts. It breathed. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Gordon and Naomi sat on the porch, watching the lake shimmer under the moonlight. The air was cool and still, frogs croaking somewhere down the slope. Naomi held a mug of tea between her hands. "You did it," she said softly. "You built something new." He smiled faintly. "It's different this time. It's not about what I lost anymore. It's about what's left and what's worth keeping." She looked at him, her eyes warm. "You mean her?" "Hers and yours," he said. Her smile deepened, gentle, knowing. "I wasn't sure you'd ever let anyone close again." He took her hand. "Neither was I, but you didn't force it. You just stayed." Naomi laughed quietly. "Stubbornness is my superpower." Gordon squeezed her hand. "It's what saved me." Business had become something else entirely, too. Quinn Construction wasn't just rebuilding homes now. It was rebuilding lives. Wayne had convinced Gordon to start a mentorship program for young contractors, teaching them how to bid jobs, manage crews, and avoid the kind of traps that nearly ruined him. They met twice a week in a converted workshop at the edge of the yard. One evening, a young man named Eli lingered after class. "Mr. Quinn," he said nervously, "can I ask something personal?" "Sure," Gordon replied, leaning against the workbench. "I read about your story. The stuff with your ex-wife and the doctor." Eli's voice faltered. "How'd you get past it?" The anger. Gordon studied him for a long moment. "I didn't. Not at first," he admitted. "I carried it like concrete in my chest. Every day felt heavy. So what changed? I stopped asking why they did it," he said quietly, "and started asking why I survived it." Eli nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Pain's a teacher," Gordon continued. "You just have to make sure it doesn't become your master." Eli smiled faintly. "Thanks, sir." "Don't call me sir," Gordon said with a grin. "I'm just Gordon, the guy who learned things the hard way." One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the windows of his office, Gordon sat staring at an old photo on his desk, a picture of him and Camille from years ago. He didn't keep it out of nostalgia. It was a reminder. Naomi stepped in quietly, setting down a cup of coffee. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, just thinking. About her. About me," he corrected. "About the man I was. The one who kept waiting for life to make sense." She leaned on the doorframe. "And now?" "Now I don't wait," he said. "I build." Naomi smiled. "That's a good motto." He chuckled. "Maybe I'll put it on the company trucks." "Corny," she teased. "But I like it." On weekends, he and Sophie worked in the garden behind their new home, planting small saplings in neat rows. Sophie named each one. "Hope, Courage, Faith, Pancake." "Pancake." Gordon laughed. "She's the happiest tree," Sophie insisted. "Because pancakes make everyone happy." Naomi, from the porch, called out, "She's not wrong." Gordon smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Guess that makes Pancake our mascot." Sophie threw her arms around him suddenly. "I love you, Daddy." He froze for a heartbeat, then held her close. "I love you too, Bug." And in that simple moment, the smell of earth, the sound of Naomi's laughter, Sophie's heartbeat against his chest, Gordon realized something. Revenge had never been the cure. Truth had been. Clarity had been. He'd finally understood that justice wasn't about destroying what hurt you. It was about reclaiming what made you whole. That night, Gordon tucked Sophie in, her crown from the adoption day sitting on the nightstand. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily, "are we happy now?" He brushed her hair back, smiling. "Yeah, sweetheart, we are." Downstairs, Naomi waited with 2 mugs of cocoa. As he joined her on the couch, she leaned against his shoulder. "You think you'll ever stop looking back?" she asked quietly. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I'll stop letting it chase me." She smiled. "Good, because we've got a lot of life ahead." He looked around the house, the photos on the walls, the laughter echoing faintly from upstairs. "Yeah," he said softly. "We do." Outside, the wind rustled the young trees Sophie had planted. They bent with the breeze but didn't break, roots firm, reaching deeper every day. Neither did he. 5 years later, the world looked nothing like the one Gordon Quinn had crawled out of. The lake shimmered gold beneath the sunset, the house he'd built standing strong at its edge, all wood, glass, and light. Laughter spilled from the yard, that soft, unguarded kind of laughter that only comes from peace. Naomi's voice rose above Sophie's, playful, warm. Inside his office, Gordon sat at his desk, sorting mail, bills, business offers, a flyer for a local trade school. Then one envelope stopped him cold. No return address, just his name typed in precise letters. He didn't need to open it to know. Camille. For a long moment, he just stared at it. The air seemed to thicken. He could almost smell the hospital antiseptic again, hear the echo of that day when his world fell apart. Finally, he slit the envelope open with his thumb. The letter was written in her familiar cursive, sharp, elegant, and cold. "Gordon, you think you've won. You think that little girl will never learn what you've done, what you're not. But she will. She'll grow up, and she'll hate you for lying. You can't erase blood. You can't rewrite truth. Enjoy your little fantasy life while it lasts." Camille, the venom in every word was deliberate, calculated. Gordon read it once, slowly, then set it down on the desk. For a brief second, the old ache stirred, that cold, empty burn that used to consume him. But it passed like smoke through open air. He picked up the letter again, fed it into the shredder beside the desk, and watched it vanish, strip by strip, until nothing remained but the faint hum of the machine. When it stopped, he exhaled, leaned back, and smiled. Outside, Naomi's voice carried through the open window. "Sophie, not so close to the fence. The paint's still wet." A burst of laughter followed, then Sophie's bright reply. "Okay, Mom." Gordon stood and walked to the window. Naomi was kneeling in the grass, her hair tied up, smudged with streaks of white paint. Beside her, Sophie, 12 now, all legs and sunshine, was holding a paintbrush twice her size. They looked up as he stepped outside. "There's the boss." Naomi called. "You gonna inspect our masterpiece?" "I might," he teased, walking down the steps. "Though I think you're both guilty of overpainting." Sophie grinned. "That's not a thing. Tell that to my budget," he said, feigning sternness. Naomi laughed, standing to wipe her hands on a rag. "Dinner's almost ready. Come eat before Sophie paints the dog again." "Hey," Sophie cried. "That was one time." "One too many," Naomi replied, kissing her forehead. Gordon reached them, wrapping an arm around Naomi's waist. The evening light caught her ring, his mother's, the one he'd finally pulled out of a drawer 2 years after the trial. Naomi wore it like it belonged there because it did. Sophie looked between them, rolling her eyes with a grin. "Gross. You're gonna kiss, aren't you?" "Probably," Gordon said. She squealed, running toward the house. "I'm telling the dog." Naomi laughed until she leaned against him. "She's too much like you." "She's exactly like her mom," he said quietly. Naomi's smile softened. "You really mean that?" "I do." He looked out over the water, at the fading sunlight turning everything copper and calm. We built something real, Naomi. That's what I mean. Dinner was simple: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and Naomi's lemon pie. Sophie dominated the conversation, rambling about her school science fair and the treehouse she wanted to build. "Only if you help, Daddy," she said mid-bite. "Oh, I'll help," he promised. "But this time, we're using real plans, not your doodles." "They're designs," she protested. Naomi smirked. "Our little architect." Gordon chuckled. "She gets that from me." Naomi arched a brow. "Pretty sure she gets her stubbornness from me." They laughed, the sound wrapping around the table like warmth itself. After dinner, Sophie disappeared upstairs to video call her friends. Gordon and Naomi stepped outside with their coffee, the stars just beginning to pierce the dusk. The lake was still. The world was quiet. Naomi took his hand. "You never told me what was in that letter." He looked at her, the faintest smile at the corner of his lips. "Nothing worth remembering." She squeezed his hand. "Good." They stood there for a while, saying nothing, letting the breeze fill the silence. Finally, Gordon spoke, softly, more to himself than her. "You lost, Camille. I didn't just survive. I lived." Naomi turned to him, curiosity in her eyes. "What was that?" He smiled, shaking his head. "Just an old ghost saying goodbye." Later, when the lights in the house dimmed and the world fell quiet, Gordon lingered by Sophie's doorway. She was fast asleep, her hair fanned across the pillow, a faint smile on her face. He thought of that first day in court, the chaos, the heartbreak, the fear that he'd lose her forever. And now here she was safe, whole his. He whispered, "Good night, kiddo," and turned out the light. Downstairs, Naomi waited by the window, a book in her lap. She out, like a rock. "Then come here," she said, patting the couch. He did, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked, the crickets sang, and peace, real peace, filled every space that once knew pain. Outside, the moon rose high, casting silver light across the lake and the home he'd built with his own hands. The ghosts were gone. The lies were ashes. And Gordon Quinn, once a broken man, had finally learned what it meant not just to survive, but to live.